the first woman to sit in an executive seat and hold a P&L in the company's history. It's 118 years. Coming to Europe and coming into this position, I mean, it's a life changer. So I've had to learn so much. One of the reasons I moved to the North Face was the leadership team. So at Nike, the leadership team was
In this Sports and Outdoor Mentors episode, I chat with Liz Wilson, the General Manager of Softgoods for the Rossignol Group. Liz has spent 30 years leading product creation teams in some of the biggest and most iconic brands in the sports and outdoor sectors, including Nike and the North Face. Her experience in building world-class products and leading world-class product creation teams is truly impressive. So if you want to learn the secrets of her impressive career, keep listening, and if you enjoy the episode, please leave us a review. So Liz, 13 years with Nike, 6 years with the North Face, 6 years with Outdoor Research, a couple of years with Royal Robbins, a year with Oakley, and now 2 and ongoing years with Rossignol, and I'm sure many more. So, you look at your resume, you look at your LinkedIn profile, and it's like a dream career. I mean, something that many people would dream of in terms of the roles that you've had with the brands that you've had. But of course, we all know that resumes and LinkedIn profiles only tell one side of the story, and usually the positive side. So I'm interested, looking back over your career, what's been the biggest challenge that you've had to face in your career?
So yes, I've had an amazing career, and really that career has been a culmination of my perseverance to rise through the organizations, but also into a leadership position. So I've been very focused in my goal. And you might say, well, that's something that maybe came easy, but it was actually something that came really, really hard. And it's been years and years of hard work and sacrifice and focus to really get where I am. And that's because I didn't know how to do it in the beginning. There was no roadmap. I was the first person in my family, on my mother's side of the family, to go to college. I had no assistance on how to do it, where to go, how to take tests. As many great merchants will tell you, that the industry is full of ADHD. Yep. And we use it a bit as our superpower. So, for me, I really had to figure it out on my own. I didn't know what I wanted to. I knew I wanted to be in product. I knew I wanted to be in apparel. Yeah. And so early in my career, in my last year of high school, my student advisor told me that I would have a fantastic career in the service industry.
Okay.
So yeah, aspirant. I said, so I'm going to have a great career as a flight hostess. Okay. But, I was fortunate. And when we speak of like people who inspire you the most, I was really fortunate that I had my aunt and uncle to really be a guiding light for me. And they offered me some assistance, just a little push in the right direction. My grandfather left me a tiny bit of money that I was able to use to start my my career or my school. My school. But I had to self-fund essentially my university degree, and back then there was no path. So I'm now an advisor and at the School of Business for Oregon State University, which was my alma mater. And I tease them because the merchandising program is now in the School of Business, where it should be. But back when I was in university, it was in the School of Home Economics.
Wow.
So I have a degree in home economics, which I find to be
Wow.
not
That's
incredibly
amazing.
useful, but that's how they thought of this industry back then. And so there was no merchant, there was no merchandising. You were either a buyer, which I found out I'm really not great at math, so that wasn't a good. I did try it. You could be a buyer, you could be a designer, you could be a developer or a pattern maker, but there wasn't the person or a defined role of what that was.
Yeah.
And so I started my career and my first, I'd say, probably 6 years in retail.
Yeah.
So I started in retail, which is really hard work. But I'm really thankful for that because I learned about the customer. And so when I had the opportunity to start at Nike back then, I started at Nike Town Portland as a floor manager.
Yeah.
And I really worked my way up. I was the most annoying person at the company because I would do anything in my power to find out who do I need to talk to, what does it look like. And one day, this woman, her name's Roma Pizer. So if you're listening, Roma, you came and gave a speech at the store before it opened, and you talked about what it meant to be a merchant and what a merchandiser looked like. And when she gave that speech, I was like, "That's it. That's what I want to do. That is what I would be good at." And so I literally started the path to figure out how to get in there.
Wow.
And I slowly worked my way into that role. It took me about a year, but I was, once I got in, I was in, and I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do.
Interesting.
So it's definitely been a career of trying to figure it out along the way. There isn't, or it's a lot more defined now, but back then it really wasn't. I mean, at Nike, I was probably, I'd say, the third class of merchandisers that really shaped the future of the brand.
Yeah.
And I like to say that it was definitely Nike that helped me understand it and become a great product person. I had really, really good teachers back then.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's definitely been just kind of figuring it out along the way. There isn't a roadmap.
Yeah. So when you were studying home economics,
yes.
And that were you at that time, you were already kind of working in Nike in the store, or did that come afterwards?
No, way after. So
Okay.
I didn't actually start at Nike until I was in my late 20s.
Okay.
Mid to late 20s.
Okay.
So I spent my first 6 years. So I worked at Victoria's Secret back when it was still privately owned, and then transitioned to limited. So I learned about how to plan a floor, the whole planogram of merchandising and making a store beautiful. I then worked at Victoria's Secret, then to Saks Fifth Avenue.
Okay. Yeah.
And I thought for sure I would end up moving to New York and becoming a buyer and that life. And I realized that wasn't really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So then I moved to Nike. A friend worked there, and I really wanted to get into Nike. So she helped me get into the retail store. In fact, we're still friends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's fun to look back at those people who started with you in the industry and who are still with you.
Yeah. You said there that you had the desire to move into let's say the apparel, the merchant business, but what was it that drove that? Was there something earlier on in your kind of life that you happened to be passionate about apparel or textiles or merchandising? Or
I loved clothes.
Okay.
And that came from my grandmother. So when I was my grandmother on my father's side was a very glamorous woman. She was very petite and small. But she always had a set of pearls. She always had a cashmere cardigan twin set and little pedal pushers, and always with a cigarette and a crystal glass of scotch. So not necessarily very much a madman kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Exactly, very and red lipstick.
Yeah.
And she died quite young when I was quite young, and so I just have this memory of her though, and she took me shopping when I was young a couple of times, and literally as a 4-year-old, that is so, and kind of 4, 5, 6 is so imprinted and burned in my head as this memory of just the best time of my life, where she would take me to this store called Younglands in Portland, Oregon. It's not there anymore, but it was a kid's dream. There were slides that went into the dressing rooms. They had granimals, right? So you could match your zebra top with your zebra pants.
Wow.
So I think that's where I started at my merchant brain.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, we would go to Henry Teely's, which was a Portland institution.
Okay.
And I would have a Shirley Temple, and she would have a Scotch. And and it was just, I think, one of the best memories of my life. And so that, and then her sister, so my great aunt, I guess, was a buyer at Meyer and Frank.
Okay.
And so I think it's just literally in my blood.
Yeah.
And she was one of the first, women to have a career and a family, which was very uncommon back then.
Yeah.
So I had these 2 glamorous sisters on my father's side that I didn't see that often, but were this, like, literally like this shining light that I went to.
Okay.
And I always loved clothes. I was always very creative. I didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so, fortunately Gen X, right, we are the thrift store generation.
Yeah.
And so I started, we would go to the Goodwill, we would go to, the as-is bins, and we would, find vintage. And I loved vintage growing up, and would put together, fun outfits. And my mom caught me one day going to school, and I needed a skirt, like, for my outfit. And so I decided, well, I have this black t-shirt, so I'll just put that on as a skirt and tuck the sleeves in my waistband. And my mom was like, "Are you wearing a t-shirt for a skirt?" I'm like, "Yeah." Why not?
Why not? Exactly. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Looking back over those 13 years, what was the best and the worst experience of working within such a big, corporate organization like Nike?
Mm-hmm. So, I think many people will say this about their times in different, companies, but I do believe that I was there during the best years.
Yeah.
So I started in product my first job in product was in 1999, 2000. So, and I started in apparel marketing services, which was the division that created a custom-made product for the athletes.
Okay. Cool.
So my first job was kitting out the most famous athletes in the world and really having, like, direct contact with them.
Amazing.
Which doesn't exist. So my best experience at Nike has to be, and again, so lucky, perfect, right time, right place, I was in charge of the U.S. Postal cycling team.
Okay. Yeah.
And Lance Armstrong.
Wow.
The first year that Nike sponsored.
Wow.
U.S. Postal. So that was the 2000 Tour de France. And I worked on their uniforms, and it was a really, really hard project. Lots of sponsors, cycling kits. It was all made in Italy at this very small factory. Plus, you had, working with Lance's and the U.S. Postal teams sponsors, so their sponsors, but also their the management company. And at that time, cycling in the U.S. was just not that popular, and nor was it that popular within Nike. And so it was kind of this quiet project off to the side.
Yeah.
And right before I was moving into my next role, I was called by the sponsors and said, "Hey, Liz, no one has signed up for the sponsor tour at the event. You know, no one has signed up to come to the Tour de France from Nike, and it's a sponsors tour. It's free." And they said, "You should come because you've done all the work." And I said, "You're right. I should come." And so I went to my boss, you know, young. I go to my boss. I said, "Hey, I just got invited to go to the tour." And she said, "How much will it cost?" I'm like, "Nothing." And she said, "Great, go." And I said, "Okay." She's like, "And take Heather, who is going to replace you, with you so that she can meet the team and meet Lance, and you guys can have an easier transition." I'm like, "Done." So
Amazing.
Heather and I, who, you know, we're in our, you know, mid-20s, we go to Europe, you know, we fly in, and the first stop on the tour is Lausanne, Switzerland. And we show up at the hotel, which is this unbelievable, I mean, even to today's standard,
Yeah.
I would be in awe.
Yeah.
This beautiful chateau overlooking the lake, Lake Lausanne, and our opening ceremony dinner is at the Olympic Museum
Wow.
with the head of the IOC as the speaker. And so we show up, you know, and everyone starts introducing themselves. "Hello, I'm the U.S. Postmaster General."
Oh my God.
"Hello, I am the president and CEO of Visa." "Hello, I am the founder of Yahoo." This is pre-Google. And then Heather and I stand up and we're like, "I'm a product line coordinator. Like, I'm not even a product line manager yet." And we stand up and we say, "Hello, we're from Nike, and we, you know, we outfit the team." And so we talk about, you know, being in a place with a group of people where you feel like you're completely an imposter, right?
Yeah.
We spent a week on the tour on a 5-star like trip, going to chateaus and wine tasting and these amazing dinners. And that year, and then, you know, cordoned off areas
Yeah.
on the race. And then with the finale, so we were at the finish line when Lance and US Postal won the race.
Wow.
And the celebratory evening was emceed by Robin Williams,
Wow.
who was a personal friend of Lance Armstrong and just, you know, hung out with us for the whole night. It was an unbelievable event that was never, ever given to a level at ours in the future.
Yeah,
Right?
I would imagine. Yeah.
So when they found out what we had actually done and what we'd been exposed to, it was a executive level trip.
What an amazing experience.
But, you know, to think that was something that we were able to do back then, it was an unbelievable experience. So
Yeah.
definitely one of the most exciting and memorable opportunities that I had.
I'm sure.
And I got to drive the U.S. Postal car, you know, and we met with Lance, we met with the team, we worked on the uniforms, we, you know, talked to them about what was working, not working, and we literally hand delivered some of the goods to the teams. But
Amazing.
it was quite an event. So
I bet.
I think that was, you know, and that wasn't the only time I had that type of exposure. You know, I worked with Serena Williams and Maria Sharapova on tennis,
Yeah.
and, you know, sat in their bedrooms, worked on the line with them and the designer. So, you know, you're at that time, and I'm sure even today, but at that time, the availability and exposure that you had to these world-class athletes at a pretty low level of a position was quite phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, most people wouldn't believe that you have that level of exposure.
Yeah.
And so I think that for me really kind of helped. It makes them human. They're people too, and they're insecure and as well, and have to have their products a certain way.
Wow.
It certainly was an opportunity that I'm very, very lucky to have had.
Yeah, no, for sure.
On the flip side, the hardest, Nike is a hard place. It's very, very competitive.
Yeah.
They move you around a lot. You don't get a lot of say into where you're going to go, which can be frustrating and difficult. But I think the hardest part, and why I ultimately left Nike, was that once you reach a certain point, right? It's almost easy to excel to a certain point.
Okay.
And then you hit director spot, right?
Yeah.
You hit that director level, and then it's really hard.
Okay.
Or at least it was for me.
Yeah.
Because again, I didn't know what to do, right? I oftentimes, I'm just kind of making it up as it goes along.
Yeah.
And you can do that to a certain point, but once you hit that director point, you kind of need to know how to do it.
Yeah.
Or you can't fake it anymore.
Yeah.
And I do believe in the fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
That was my early career, and you then needed a sponsor.
Okay.
Right? You needed someone who would take you to the next level.
Yeah.
And it can be a frustrating experience.
Yeah.
And ultimately I got very frustrated with that process. And I was lured away by
Yeah.
the North Face.
Yeah.
And, at a time when I had spent, I'm from Portland. I had never lived outside of Portland except during university. And so for me, an opportunity to move to California
Yeah.
and to own a new business was too attractive to pass up.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly my next question, because, okay, so you were working for the number one sports brand in the world, doing at the time around $18 billion, which is amazing when you think about it, how much they're doing now.
Right. Yeah.
How much it's grown in that time.
My own business was about like
Yeah.
500 million.
Yeah.
And, at the time when I left, and, I'm sure it's,
It's
significantly
crazy
bigger than
Yeah.
it was back then.
But then you went to North Face, as you mentioned, which at the time was probably the largest outdoor brand globally, but still only about 10% of the size of Nike, which when you think about it, is kind of puts the outdoor industry into perspective a little bit within the broader sporting goods industry. But that role seems to be probably the first real senior leadership role that you probably had in your career. And you've maybe touched on this a little bit already with the kind of, fake it until you make it. But how did you find those first few months of not only starting in a new business with a new brand, but also in that kind of first more, let's say, senior leadership or strategic leadership role? How were those first kind of 3, 6, maybe 12 months?
So one of the reasons I moved to the North Face was the leadership team. So at Nike, the leadership team was terrifying.
Okay. In what way?
They were just terrifying.
Okay.
They were
because they were kind of almost like
omnipotent.
Okay.
Like a little bit like Oz.
Yeah.
Right? So, I did work for Mindy Grossman, who was, I learned, you at the time you don't realize how much you're learning from someone, but really Mindy Grossman was an incredibly powerful a woman, a female leader in my past, but she was also terrifying. And not because she was trying to be terrifying. She just, for us, we were just scared of her, right? It was normal. And also the leadership team wasn't always as present. So because they were also being moved around a lot.
Yeah.
So when I interviewed at the North Face, I interviewed with a gentleman named Jim Gerson.
Okay.
And Jim is like, and I won't be the only one who says this. He's like the Mr. Rogers
Okay.
of the industry. Like, he is the nicest, most wonderful human.
Yeah.
And I needed that at that point in my career. I needed someone who would take the time to help develop me, right? And to go from this kind of rough, I'm definitely rough around the edges, right? Really, just I had not been formed. I had basically raised myself, raised by wolves, Gen X, right? Totally. And so Jim, and then also Steve Rendell. So Steve Rendell Steve was the president of the North Face at that time.
Yeah.
And Jim Gerson was the VP of product.
Okay.
And so having those two, especially Steve in those early years where he was really, really engaged in the business, was phenomenal. So I had someone who was excited to bring me in from Nike and saw, how much raw potential I had and was willing to take the opportunity and the time to kind of help shape that, was really important. Because the North Face was a tough business. So I was hired to start the performance business. So that was the time when they broke out into activity, they call it the activity-based model, right? So they had just broken everything out, and a little bit like kickball, everyone had picked their teams before I got there.
Yeah. Okay.
And I got there and I got everybody else.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that I'm really, really good at is recognizing talent and developing talent myself. And so I had some really good raw talent on that team.
Yeah.
That maybe others hadn't recognized, or didn't, I have Josh Bridgman, if you're watching this, I love watching him, he's still with VF and is quite senior. But Josh was, on my development side. He was incredible raw talent at that time. And so I was lucky to have a few people who were really, really good, who just needed some product guidance. And they basically gave me the keys to the kingdom and said, go figure it out. Here are your resources. And that's, also something I'm really good at is just kind of figuring out the opportunity. We met with athletes. I took the entire team to support an ultra race, the Wasatch 100.
Okay.
And we went and we supported mile 85 at a 100-mile race.
Yeah.
So that we could watch the runners come through and we could see like what happens to them at mile 85 and how can we think about product and how can we think about solving their needs, right? And also it was a great opportunity for all of us at an early stage of a team forming to understand how do we work together? Where are our weak links maybe?
Yeah.
Right. And that was and it was a good opportunity for me to be able to see, how they work together, where were the holes, in the organization, where did we need, more strength or, who was working well together, who wasn't, who snuck off and hid in the tent all night while we, cheered people on and made breakfast at 4:00 in the morning. So it was not only good for me to see it, but it was good for the team to see like, oh, that person isn't helping, isn't. And so when I need something from that person, maybe they're not going to be there for me. So then that person ultimately left the team and we replaced them with someone, who was an inspiration.
Yeah.
So
interesting. And another I already touched on this, but another change, obviously moving from Nike to North Face, is just the size, the scale of the business and the organization. Because, you know, like I said, starting with the biggest, I guess it was only going to get smaller, but how that must have been quite, was it a kind of like somehow a culture shock, or how did you find that transition?
So I went from, it's funny, I started at the top and have continuously worked my way down. I've never quite gotten back to where I was in the beginning. So I left a beautiful office that looked out on the lake.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I moved into a desk in a warehouse in San Leandro.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So at the time I moved to the North Face, you know, this is 2008. The market's about to crash.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And I moved at the time the North Face was 800 million when I joined, and still in the warehouse that they had been in for the past 10 years, and had not moved. I was there during the transition to Alameda when we got a new campus, but you know, I definitely spent a good, you know, the first half, if not 3/4 of my time working, you know, in that warehouse, faxing in expense reports to Greensboro, North Carolina, and you know, it was definitely a different environment. Yeah.
But how did you adapt to that?
Well, you know, I think if you think back to my roots, right? So I'm used to that. That's for me that's a more normal place to be for me. I think when I got to the North Face, I felt more comfortable actually.
Okay.
And I was able to, you know, the people that work in the outdoor industry, and I've stayed there, right, for the rest of my career. I left once, and I, you know, that was a very short-lived experience, and I really came back because I missed the industry, right? I love the outdoor industry. It's where I feel most at home, and the people. And a lot of that has to do with the people who work in the industry, right?
Yeah.
They're passionate about the sport. They're passionate about creating great product that works. And so when you're working on product that is solving a need, and yes, you want an aesthetic beauty to it, but you're really solving a problem. And for me, that's my favorite place to be.
So soon after you left TNF, you started playing a more active role kind of outside of your career, if you like, in terms of volunteering and supporting different initiatives. So you were an executive mentor at Canberra Outdoors for, I think, almost 10 years. You also volunteered for the International Women's Forum, and I think still do today. So it's clear from probably those two choices, and maybe if the audience doesn't know Canberra Outdoors, is, you know, it's well, I'll maybe let you kind of explain kind of what Canberra did.
Yeah. So while I was at the North Face, I became very active in both public lands as well as in giving back. Right. So I joined the board of directors for the Wilderness Land Trust, which is an organization still very active that its sole mission is to take the in-holdings that are within wilderness and purchase that land, facilitate the purchase of that land, and then transfer that land back to the public. Right. So that's all they do. And so I was able to work with this group of people for 10 years, and I'm still very close with many of them. But people who spent their careers at the Sierra Club, or working in Washington D.C. lobbying for public lands. So I had that opportunity when I started when I was at the North Face, and was able to actually create a partnership between the North Face and Wilderness Land Trust when we transferred the Castle Crags Monument, which is a huge climbing area in Northern California in the Shasta National Forest. And so the North Face actually partnered with the Wilderness Land Trust to make that transfer possible.
Yeah.
They helped fund us. So that was a really wonderful program to be part of. And then at the same time, and mentorship was non-existent in my career. It just didn't happen. There was no mentorship program. There maybe informal, casual. I had mentioned when I was at Nike, you needed a sponsor.
Yeah.
That was about as far as it went, right? And so I met this woman while I was at the North Face. Her name's Ann Kerchak. She's since passed away, unfortunately, which is really tragic. But she was one of the co-founders of IOWC, so the Outdoor Industry Women's Coalition,
Okay.
which was the original Camber.
Okay.
So Camber eventually morphed into Camber later, and Ann Kerchak founded the mentorship program.
Okay.
And the North Face actually funded that for the majority of its existence. And so Anne introduced me early on to this organization, and she was my first mentor. She helped me really navigate a very, very male dominated industry.
Yeah.
At that time, we're talking, mid 2000s, right? And I would, go to Europe, and this unfortunately is still the case, especially in Europe. I would come to a meeting with doing a North Face global event, and I would be the only woman in the room, and still sometimes the only woman in the room. But she helped me with that because it's hard. It's hard to be a woman and the only woman in the room. There were a few other female leaders at the time, which was very, which was great, but we each were responsible for different parts of the business, and so we weren't always together. And so Anne helped me kind of channel my energy and my focus, and to kind of take gender out of the equation. And so and just be a leader,
Yeah.
and just be a person,
Yeah.
right? And to stop worrying about whether or not I was the only woman or there were all men, but to just really, have that power and hold it as my own,
Yeah.
and kind of get rid of that distraction.
Yeah.
And that has been how I've lived my, the rest of my career. So I have Anne to thank for that. And then Anne got me involved in Camber. And so I was at first just a member of the group, right? But then I transitioned into the formal mentorship program. And as you said, that program, I'm looking forward to hopefully replicating that. It's almost a year-long commitment between a mentor and a mentee to work together, to meet every 2 weeks, ideally, and to really be that person's advocate, and to help them and to help guide them. Mentorship is a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think is so important to remember and understand, is that, it's the sharing of experiences and helping each other in different ways, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have children, and so for me, this industry, this is my family, and
Yeah.
so you get to see a family member succeed, which is incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. So after then quite a few years of being a mentor, what would you say is the key success factor to that mentor-mentee relationship? Because I'm sure not all of those relationships work, right?
Right.
So yeah, what for you is important to make sure that both mentees and mentors kind of succeed and get what they want out of that relationship?
I only had one difficult relationship, and it still worked for what that person needed. So for me, I tried to take myself out of that I'm doing this for them. This is but they have to work.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think the most important thing about a mentor-mentee relationship, especially one that's a formal program such as this,
Yeah.
is that understanding and respect of each other,
Yeah.
of each other's time, and to make sure that, if you don't have something to talk about, or that you formalize that conversation, and maybe one day is a 15-minute conversation and another is 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
So depending on the need. But I found that, and in speaking to other people who were part of that mentorship, if you didn't set up clear, and that was my job. If I didn't set up a clear guideline of, first of all, have you had a mentor before? Do you know what it is?
Yeah.
Right? Do you know what this relationship is about?
Yeah.
And some do and some don't, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? And so kind of explaining, and also explaining the difference between a mentor and someone who's your champion, right?
Yeah.
Because they're different.
Yeah.
And maybe the same person can do both,
Sure.
of course.
Yeah.
But you're if you want to sponsor, that's one thing, and if you want to mentor, that's another thing. And again, there can be some crossover, but you have to understand that a mentor is there to help. And if you don't also want to accept the information and the advice, and I'm not saying that everything had to be done, but if you're not willing to put the work in, and then it didn't work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I think, hopefully with an event that we're attending today, so the Global Game Shapers Initiative, and also the OIA mentorship program in the UK as well, hopefully we can start supporting more women and start encouraging more women to develop within the industry, which is great.
I'm looking forward to joining that as a mentor, because that's how we met, right? So, and I'm incredibly thankful that you remembered that about our conversation, because that's why I'm here today. Going to attend the Global Game Shapers, because I miss that community that I had in the US, and I want to build that in Europe, especially because I do see women in leadership not as visible as they are in the US. And sometimes you think it's actually, it can be a surprise, because you think of Europe as a bit more progressive in so many areas, but that is one area that there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. After now, I think next year it'll be 30 years within the sports and outdoor industry. Sorry. But I think it was 1997. No, I think you started at Nike.
97,
So, okay. So no, there's a couple of years to go. But anyway, it's close.
Thanks.
It's close. Sorry.
Thank
This cut. So 30 years and an amazing career. Like I said, like I started with, brilliant roles with iconic brands. What's been your key to success, would you say? And of course, it's never just one thing. There's never one silver bullet. But looking at yourself, why do you think you've been able to have such amazing roles with such amazing businesses?
I think that's because I really I think about it from the customer, right? So I was, again, incredibly lucky, fortunate, however you want to call it, to be at Nike during the early years, and I also attribute that to my time at retail, right? So maybe while I was in retail management, I thought I was in the seventh level of hell, but looking back on that, and then my time at Nike, those two connections, I think, are part of my success, because I always hold the customer right in front.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people do, or not as many as should.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about that, you're not making it for you, you're making it for the customer, right? You're making it for a person who is going to run a race or climb a mountain or, or go on a camping trip with their family. You think about how they're going to use it, why they're going to use it, and then connecting that back to desire. Right? So people buy products that they love, right?
Mm.
One of my favorite quotes is, when we talk about demographics and age and, oh, we want a younger customer. No one gets dressed in the morning and thinks, I want to look old and outdated. No
one would hope.
No, I mean, really, people, and so if you think about, like, I want to create, I want product to be inspiring. I want people to feel good in it. I want them to feel like they're powerful, right? And I think that's also being aware of what I'm good at too. And so staying in the sport industry, not trying to get into fashion, right? Where it's about, do I like that sleeve or is that color pretty? But to, staying in performance. I love the technologies and the materials and so I'm a truly, and I think that's the other reason I love product. Like, I love it. It still gets me excited. I still love kicking the season off. I still love sales meeting, and presenting the line to our sales forces. And so I think it's that love, like that really passionate core love of product and that core love of the customer, together. And then my third, the third leg on the stool is people. I love working with people, and I love developing and inspiring people. I love, much more of a charismatic leader, and I love to inspire people. I love to see a twinkle in their eye, and I hate video calls because for me the worst thing that ever happened was Teams meetings, yes, they're incredibly efficient but I feed off of the energy of others, and so when I have to do a presentation on a screen, it's really, really very challenging for me.
And how, obviously, so now just over 2.5 years ago, or around 2.5 years ago, you joined Rossignol to lead their Softgoods business.
Yes.
And that was the first time I think that you've worked outside of the US.
Yes.
So how's that experience been? Kind of shifting countries, cultures, big change.
Big change, biggest change of my career, of my life, really, truly. So one of the things that I am very, very proud of is, and very thankful of our CEO, Vincent Waters sought out a person like me. So when he was looking for the next general manager for Softgoods, he really wanted to find someone who had a background that is similar to me, and I am the first woman to sit in an executive seat and hold a P&L in the company's history. It's 118 years. So it's also,
it's got to start somewhere, right? That's good that it started.
It started, and Vincent wanted that to start, right? And so that for me is such a vote of confidence as well. So you come in, it's a little bit like my earlier story with Jim Gerson. It's coming into a place where someone has said, I want a person like Liz. And that already sets you up to succeed, right? I mean, you still have to come to the party and and show up and really, do what you're supposed to do. But when you have somebody already there on your side, it's incredibly powerful, which is also the mentorship part. That's my give back, right? So I think that coming to Europe and coming into this position, I mean, it's a life changer. So I've had to learn so much. I've had to learn to slow down my speech, slow down my speed. I have to be incredibly self-aware that sometimes I terrify people.
I find that quite hard to believe, but yeah, maybe for a Brit, it's maybe a little bit easier. And I've worked with a lot of US companies.
The Italians and the French sometimes don't know quite what to think of me, and that's okay. I've tried to introduce, I've tried to introduce them to Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
Because I am a bit of a Ted Lasso.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And in fact, my core message at our last sales meeting was believe, but not everybody gets it. So I think that for me, I've had to completely adapt the way I speak, the way I show up, and to calm it down a little bit. So definitely slow it down.
Mm-hmm.
So when I speak with non-English speakers, I don't just talk louder, but I slow down.
Yeah.
I also found out that Americans have tons of sayings, right?
Yeah.
That and idioms that no one else understands.
No, exactly.
And my first meeting, I told the Italian team, I said, I feel like we're just throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what will stick. And the look on their faces, I will never forget.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost a good attempt to be culturally relevant with spaghetti. But yeah.
The look of shock and horror on their faces and confusion of like, what is happening? Why would you do that? And I got 0% understanding. So literally not one person in that group of people understood what I was talking about. So then for me, that was the first sign that, okay, I need to stop that. They don't understand when the tail wags the dog, or throwing spaghetti, or so I've had to really temper that. I've also had to really become more aware of cultural differences, because the U.S. is, it's a melting pot of different cultures, different people, different, lots of differences. But countries are a bit more similar, right? So there's French culture, there's Italian culture. So that's been something that I've had to really learn and understand. And I also have teams that are separated by distance. So part of my team is in Moran, which is our headquarters. Part of the team, the majority of the team is Milan. And then I have part of the team in Montebelluna.
Okay.
And so I, being the kind of, I love, like, I don't know, cheesy sayings and stuff. So I created M to the power of 3. So speaking of, and trying to help the team also understand, like, we can't do it. One M will not succeed, right? We need all 3 M's working together. We need all 3 locations working together in order to succeed. And so trying to kind of bring that old-fashioned, inspiration. I was a camp counselor in my early years, so I definitely still have to, bring some of my camp counselor kind of, let's all get together and enjoy what we do and have fun, and everybody roll up their sleeves, and so that's been, I think, how I've worked through that transition, and I love it. I tell people I feel like I've found like where I'm supposed to be, and I don't want to go back.
Okay. So what's the the most enjoyable, but also the least enjoyable part of your role as a leader, not specifically with what you're doing today, but it could be, but just generally as a leader of people in a business? What do you love to do the most, and what's the thing where you're like, couldn't do that this afternoon? Because we all have them, right?
We do.
Yeah.
The thing that my least enjoyable, I mean, and this is going to sound like a packed answer, but I hate making decisions that impact people in a negative way, right? And business is really tough right now for all of us. And we're, and so the thing I like the least is taking my focus away from where my superpower is and where I'm, where I love that, creating product and creating businesses and developing people and taking that energy and funneling it into, how do we make the month? How do we continue to operate? How do we, I love the challenge. I love the challenge of developing a new business. And it's not that, it's the hard work of like, we just had somebody leave on the team, do we have the budget to replace that person? Or am I going to have a hard conversation with somebody and ask them to do more than their job because we need to wait to fund that role? So those are the things that I hate doing, right? And and I mean they're necessary. I have to do them, but they're certainly not my favorite part of the job. Telling somebody that they can't hire a backfill, that when I know they critically need it, that's terrible, right? That's not fun. Or having to make a decision and cut people, like that also. That's thankfully I haven't had to do that for a while.
Okay. And
then what I best, I mean, when we have great wins, we just launched footwear as a brand, which is such a huge project. So we've launched into trail running, and I mean, talk about a team effort and really just very few resources, but a lot of great talent, and it's working. Like people are responding, and we're getting strong sell-throughs. The customer is responding to the product. The buyers are responding because the customer is responding, right? So celebrating wins and being able to celebrate that as a team, that's my absolute favorite, no matter what you're working on.
What's the most valuable piece of advice you've ever been given?
Lindsay Hayes, if you're listening.
I know Lindsay.
Do you know?
Yes.
Lindsay Hayes, when I was in my first job as a product line manager, I was in ACG, all conditions gear, and I was in my first Europe meeting. So full circle, right? Now I'm sitting here in Europe, but I was sitting at the table and she said to me, shut your mouth, open your ears. Best advice ever, especially when dealing with sales, right? And so I've always had a very, very strong relationship with sales. I'm a bit of a salesperson myself, but
really?
But I love, they're out in the front line, and so they know what the buyers are saying. They, in many cases, know what the customers are saying, and so she taught me to stop trying to get my opinion or my thoughts across the table and to shut it and listen to what they're saying. And so I've carried that. That was, in 2000, I think I got, when I worked with Lindsay, and she was an incredibly powerful female, not, I wouldn't say a formal mentor, but somebody who I looked up to and who really inspired me and gave me some great advice along the way.
Absolutely. Great. So thinking a bit more about the industry, looking ahead to the next, 3-5 years, what's the biggest challenge you think that we have to address as an industry?
Supply chain. I recently spoke at the Summit for Sustainable Organizations at University of Oregon in May, which was a really wonderful experience. And I sent them a list of topics that I could speak on, right? So, I can talk about being the first female leader in an organization. I can talk about taking a 118-year-old heritage brand and transitioning it to 4 seasons, which is what we're doing right now at Rossignol. Or I can talk about tariffs and the impact of tariffs on this industry. And they came back and they said, please talk about tariffs, And so for me, when a business school is asking you to speak about that topic, how, and this was in May, so it was really raw and fresh. But supply chain is definitely something that we have to address. Not just supply chain, but and this industry, it's supply chain on one side, on the operations side, and on the business side, it's 4 season. It's like, how do you, Rossignol, we are a heritage ski brand to the core, right? And we are working harder than ever to transition into a 4 season brand, into making sure that we have products that are viable and desirable and the top performance for our customers to enjoy their time on the mountain, no matter what the weather is, right? Whether it's snowing, raining, windy, sunny, so that we just ensure that our customers and the people that love our brand can be outside in the mountain environments, because we don't know when the snow is going to come or when it's going to go. And you used to be able to predict weather patterns, and you really can't now. And so I think for those of us in this industry that rely on weather, and so many of us do, I think that's an incredibly challenging business, especially if you're a hard goods brand in the core and you're trying to move into soft goods. So that, and then the supply chain, that, whether it be tariffs, whether it be, trying to find where to build your product and maintain profit for the company and an affordable price for the customer. That challenge is becoming greater and greater, right? So I think those are probably the 2, biggest challenges that we will not overcome in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Let's go to the last question. So if today was your last day, and you were going to retire and walk away into the sunset, what would your message be to your team?
You've got this.
Perfect.
Really, my job as a leader is to turn them into leaders, right? And I have a really strong leadership team that, that we've been working together. Some of us have been working, I've only been there for 2 years, but, I believe in building strong, that leadership team beneath me is, and then the leadership team beneath them is incredibly important, because you want to essentially obsolete yourself eventually, right? And so I think that, I think making sure that I'm giving them the tools and the tools, the inspiration, the vision for them to continue forward, whether it be with us at Rossignol or in their next roles in the future. I think that's our job as a leadership team.
Absolutely.
So.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Liz.
you.
It's been
Dan,
super
thank you,
interesting, and I hope very inspiring for many people. Like I said, it's an amazing journey that you've had, and we could only touch a fraction of it today, but I think lots of really amazing insights. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us today, and see you soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. please ensure you click the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss a new episode. And if you're interested in what else we're doing, please make sure to follow us on LinkedIn. I'm Dan Trapp, and you've been listening to Sports and Outdoor Mentors.